Okay, maybe we can start. Good morning, dear colleagues. Welcome to today's coaching session on preparation of a project budget proposal. Thank you for your interest and participation. As many of you already know from previous sessions in this process, my name is Yasmina Ristovska. I'm here on behalf of the Seldi project, representing MCIC as both coordinator and technical secretariat of the network, as well as contracting authority for this call. I have more than 18 years of experience in management of EU-funded projects and especially financial management of grant contracts. And today I will elaborate on the main principles governing EU-funded grant contracts, focusing on budget preparation and overall financial management, as well as specific rules for this call. I'm aware that many of you or your colleagues in finance departments are already experienced in drafting budget proposals and managing project finances. However, our goal is to provide clear guidance and support for organizations or colleagues who may encounter challenges in this area. I've prepared a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation, which is filled with detailed information for you to reference as you work on your proposals or even in future projects. To highlight important points, you may notice that certain information repeat across slides, as these are the key areas to keep in mind during the preparation of the budget. This session will not only guide you through creating your project proposals, but also will provide insights valuable for financial management throughout the implementation of your projects. Please be informed that we are recording this session for internal purposes, and additionally, we will explore the possibility of making this recording available on websites for those who are not able to attend today or for future references. As during the presentation, I will not have an overview if someone is raising hands or writing questions in chat box. I invite you to interrupt me if you have any questions or raise them upon completion of the PowerPoint presentation. So we can start. Can anyone see the presentation? Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. So the aim of today's training or coaching session, let's say, it's obtaining general understanding of the main principles for preparation of project budget proposals in line with EU rules, with particular attention to the rules governing this specific Seldi call. The result should be of you being confident in preparing sound project budget proposals. Today, I would like to provide instructions on developing project budgets for EU-funded calls in general, while also highlighting specific details that are unique to this particular call. The presentation will cover topics such as general principles for grant contracts, rules defined with the guidelines for applicants for the Seldi call, and structure of the budget and its main components. In general, grants must respect the principles of co-financing, prohibition of double financing, and non-profit principle. The co-financing principle means that the grants may include co-financing as outlined in the relevant guidelines for applicants within the call for proposals. And in such instances, the contracting authority will not cover the entire cost of the action, but grantees will need to provide additional co-financing to the action, and it should cover a portion of the eligible expenses. And co-financing should be secured from funds obtained from funds other than funds from the European Union budget. The non-cumulative award means that each action can only receive one grant from the EU budget. Under no circumstances, the same expense can be funded twice under the union budget, nor to be double funded. So to ensure compliance, applicants must specify any other funding that is obtained for the action. While the non-profit principles means that EU grants cannot aim to generate profit for beneficiaries. The profit is defined as a surplus of receipts over eligible expenses incurred by the beneficiaries at the end of the project. If the beneficiary generates profits, the contracting authority will proportionally reduce the final grant amount by applying the percentage of its co-financing to the generated profit. Before contract signature, the contracting authority can perform budget validation process. It's also called a budget clearance process. During this phase, the contracting authority will ensure that the proposed budget complies with the guidelines for applicants, including that the grant requested falls within the specified minimum and maximum amounts and percentage of total eligible cost. Expenditures proposed by applicants meet the eligibility criteria defined with the guidelines, and correct any evident mathematical errors or ensure that proposed expenses align with intended activities defined with the project proposals and as well as market rates, and remove ineligible expenses. In this process, modifications to budget cannot increase the requested grant amount, nor the percentage of contracting authority contribution, but rather it can lead to reduction of the total contracting authority contribution if any ineligible expenses are detected and removed from the budget. This process also serves as a possibility for the contracting authority to offer guidance and support to applicants in developing comprehensive, realistic, and cost-effective budgets for their action implementation. Applicants must carefully consider eligibility criteria that are outlined in the guidelines for applicants. The budget should be detailed and balanced, and it should be presented in euro or other currency that is specified in a given call. In our call, it is euro currency. At the outset of the budget preparation phase, applicants must ensure that they have provided all necessary information in the project budget, including the budget, the justification section, and expected sources of funding. So when preparing the budget, applicants should respect principles of economy and efficiency and effectiveness, ensure that the budget is accurate, realistic, and cost-efficient. They should validate the rationality of costs in line with market prices and also with proposed project activities, thereby ensuring that the budget will be utilized efficiently. Reimbursement of eligible costs will be based on actual costs that are incurred by beneficiaries. And applicants should thoroughly review all calculations for any mathematical errors, ensuring accurate input of units and units rates, and also verify funding sources so they can apply the appropriate co-financing rate and determine the requested grant amount from the contracting authority. To develop robust budgets, applicants need to focus on activities that are outlined in their project proposal. So the project proposal is a starting point, and ensure that the budget structure and costs are logically justified. This approach allows applicants to evaluate the necessity of various types of expenses, to identify any overlooked or omitted costs that should be integrated into the budget, so to maintain alignment with the project description. An essential aspect of budget preparation assessment involves carefully reviewing the justification for each budget item and cross-referencing it with the budget itself and proposed project activities. Applicants should estimate costs that are exclusively necessary for the implementation of the action. There are two types of costs, direct eligible costs and indirect costs. Direct costs are the costs that are categorized under the initial six main budget headings. They are directly associated with the execution of proposed activities, can be directly allocated to these activities. These costs are identifiable, verifiable, and have supporting documentation as proof. They are specific to the project and arise solely from the implementation of the activities defined with the project. The main budget headings encompass different types of budget items where individual direct costs can be defined. These item descriptions must be sufficiently detailed, with all components broken down. The quantity of units and unit rates must be specified for each budget item based on provided instructions. The budget should encompass costs related to the project as a whole, irrespective of the portion financed by the contracting authority. Sorry? Do you have any question? Okay. Applicants must take care to avoid any unnecessary or unnecessarily high expenses, and consulting market prices is recommended when preparing the budget in order to define reasonable costs of different types of expenses. As we mentioned, the grant can cover only eligible costs, which are actual costs incurred by beneficiaries that meet the following criteria. These expenses occur during the implementation period of the action, which will be defined in the grant contracts. They are outlined or estimated with the project budget. They are essential for implementation of project activities. They are identifiable, verifiable, and recorded in the beneficiary's accounting records. They observe the requirements of relevant tax and social legislation. They're reasonable, justified, in line with principles of sound financial management, and particularly the principles of economy and efficiency. The budget estimate should be properly balanced, which means that income and expenditure must be equal due to the non-profit rule. Co-financing of eligible costs of the action may come from sources other than the EU budget, and contribution in kinds, which are non-financial resources made available for free of charge by the beneficiaries or by third parties, cannot be accepted as co-financing. On the following slides, I will pinpoint the requirements of the Seldi call. Any grant requested under this call must fall between minimum 7,000 and maximum 10,000 euro, and represent a Seldi contribution falling between the minimum 70% and maximum 90% of the total eligible cost of the project, and beneficiaries must provide at least 10% of co-financing. The initial planned duration of a project may fall between 9 to 12 months. Only eligible costs can be covered by the grant, and the budget should be realistic and cost-effective. Types of eligible direct costs are defined with the guidelines for applicants and may include gross salary costs for staff involved in the implementation of the action, cost of travel related to activities defined with the project, including local and international travel, direct costs incurred during the implementation phase of the activities, including costs for research, for publication, translation, interpretation, costs for organization of workshops, seminars, etc., and project office costs that are relevant for proposed activities. The direct costs that are incurred in the carrying out of the project may be eligible for flat rate funding, but the total must not exceed 7% of eligible costs. Indirect costs are eligible provided that they do not include costs that are already assigned to another budget heading in the standard grant contract. The lead applicants may be asked to justify the percentage requested before the contract is signed. And however, once the flat rate has been fixed in the grant contract, no supporting documents need to be provided by beneficiaries. If any of the applicant is in a receipt of an operating grant from the European Union, they cannot claim indirect costs with the proposed budgets. With the relevant contingency reserve is not allowed to be included. Contribution is in kind as well. And this is so important. Financial support to third parties or re-granting within your project proposals is also not allowed. Ineligible costs are also specified in the guidelines for applicants, and it can include debt service charges or interest, provision for losses, potential future liabilities, costs declared and financed by another actions or donors, purchase of land or buildings, reconstruction and renovation of buildings, purchasing vehicles, furniture, IT equipment, credit to third parties, and salary costs for personnel of national administration. This is a typical structure of a project budget for EU-funded grants. The budget template is an Excel file with 3 main spreadsheets: the budget itself with components shown on the slide, justification section, and expected sources of funding. Actually, in our case, the budget and the justification are in the same spreadsheet. And the budget consists of 6 main budget headings that cover different types of direct eligible costs of the action, then indirect costs, contingencies, and totals. Budget headings should not be changed. Budget lines under each budget heading can be adjusted in accordance with the project proposal. You can introduce or delete certain predefined budget lines or introduce new. The description of items must be sufficiently detailed and all items broken down in main component. Number of units and unit values must be specified for each budget item depending on the instructions provided. The budget has to include costs related to the project as a whole, irrespective of the part financed by the contracting authority. The budget should be estimated in euro currency for this call. You should provide explanation for each budget item in the justification section. And we recommend that you use formulas in the Excel to avoid any mathematical errors. The first budget heading, human resources, can cover costs for salaries and per diems. Cost of staff or gross salaries or wages, including applicable income taxes, social security, and other types of contribution, other remuneration-related expenses, can be eligible if staff members are essential for the implementation of the project activities. This is staff that are working under an employment contract or other equivalent appointing act and are assigned to the action. Salaries must be equal or should not exceed the rates that correspond to the beneficiary's usual policy and remuneration. They should be backed up with appropriate documentation, including contract, payslip, business statements, etc. Actual time spent on the project should be recorded on a regular basis using timesheets or equivalent time registration system established. You should present HR with categories of staff according to their role in the project. For example, project manager, project coordinator, financial officer, etc. An allocation of staff members should be reasonable in comparison to the workload imposed with the implementation of the project. Usually in high-value projects, the contracting authority may seek supporting documents to prove historical rates of salaries in the beneficiary organization prior to contract award. If project team members are not working full-time on the project, the percentage of the engagement on the project should be indicated alongside the item description. The percentage of involvement should be presented or reflected under number of units, not under unit value. And you should present full gross salaries under unit value, including all contributions according to applicable laws, while budgeted salaries should present those normally borne by applicants. Here I have provided an example of how properly defined budget should look like. The example follows the template given for this call. You can see the justification part is given in the same worksheet with the budget for easier cross-referencing. The justification includes narrative explanation of each budget line and references to activities and justification how different costs were estimated. The example provides guidance properly detailing item descriptions, defining number of units and unit rates, and offering necessary justification to substantiate the budget cost. The example refers to a project with a duration of 12 months. On the slide, I have given few examples of three different roles in a project team. As you can see, indication of involvement is given alongside the description in the budget line. Percentage of involvement is presented in number of units, while total gross salary for full-time work is given in unit rates. Additionally, the justification gives an indication of references to activities, elaboration on the budget line, and how the unit rate was determined. So, for example, the project manager will work for 40% of his working time to the project. So as you can see, 40% is presented in number of units as 40% of 12 months, or the number of units is 4.8. The total gross salary is 800 euro for this example. And in the justification, we have given an indication that the project manager will be responsible for all activities listed in the project proposal. He will be responsible for overall management of project implementation. He will be the main contact for the donor and will assure the highest quality of expertise and professionalization in tax and obligations. This is only an example of how the justification should look like. The salary that is budgeted for this position is in line with the project responsibilities and is corresponding to actual gross salaries, including social security charges and other remuneration that are normally borne by the applicant for this position. The other example is for the finance officer for 10% of working time. So the number of units will be 1.2 months for the total duration of the project. Again, the justification provides that the finance officer will be responsible for ensuring correct financial implementation, delivery of reports, etc. You have listed few points of check to see if the budget is properly defined regarding salaries. For example, you should evaluate whether the allocation of staff members is reasonable given the project workload. You should ascertain whether staff members will be engaged on a full-time or part-time basis for the project. If not full-time, ensure that the level of involvement is clearly stated alongside the item description, as in the example, project manager 40%. The percentage of engagement should be specified under number of units, not under unit value. You should ensure that you have included the entire gross salary under the unit value, including all contributions mandated by applicable laws. And gross salaries should be those normally borne by the applicants based on standard HR practices within the organization. Budget heading 1 on human resources also includes per diems. These are subsistence expenses for project staff and participants on events, conferences, eligible if essential for project activities. Per diem should not surpass what is normally borne by applicants as per its usual practices in force or internal policies and regulations. Per diems and daily subsistence allowance cover costs for accommodation, meals, local transportation, etc. Applicants should try indicate places, cities of travel if possible in compliance with the activities foreseen under the project. And you should provide clear information to the activity it relates and how these costs have been budgeted. As you can see, the per diem section can include per diems for travel abroad, local travel, and also part for per diems for conferences and seminar participants. In my example, I have foreseen under a section abroad, per diems for participation to a policy forum in Tirana for 2 project team members, 2 nights. Let's assume that the project is taking place in North Macedonia. So we have 4 per diems in number of units. The justification states that this activity is foreseen in project description as activity 8.3.3. This budget line will cover costs for per diems for 2 representatives from the applicant organization on the regional event in Tirana. The unit value is determined as an average per diem for Western Balkan countries according to official EC per diem rates, decrease for cost of lunch provided on event. Under the third part, seminar conference participants, I have an example for per diems for 2 days workshop in Ohrid for 20 participants. So we have a number of unit 40 per diems. Again, there is a reference to activity 8.1.2. This budget line will cover costs for half board accommodation for 20 participants, and the unit value is determined on the basis of inflation-adjusted historical rates and actual market prices and provided in unbinding market offers. For example, you can check prices for hotels from 3 different hotels, for example, in Ohrid, and determine some average price for full board accommodation. Again, I have listed points of check to see the budget conformity with respect to per diems. The number of per diems correspond to activities and estimated number of participants. So the application is starting point where you are preparing the per diem section. Travel destination is specified in justification, if possible, if feasible, and align with the activities outlined in the project proposal. For example, the policy forum in Tirana or workshop in Ohrid. Applicants may consider reimbursing expenses against invoices, covering accommodation, meal, local transportation, and incidental costs based on actual expenses rather than the reimbursement per diems to individuals. And per diem rates should respect internal policies and practices in the organization, provided that such procedures exist, and applicants can demonstrate past disbursements of such per diems for previous activities. The second budget heading 2, covers costs for travel. Travel costs for staff and other individuals participating in an action are eligible as long as they are necessary for project activities. Travel costs should be sufficiently justified and accurately presented. Travel may encompass international or local travel. International travel for project team members and also other conference seminar participants, including representatives from state institutions or other organizations, etc., for project requirements. Unit rates should not surpass economy class rates, so business class is not allowed. while local transportation can cover expenses for project staff, conference seminar attendees, and trainees traveling between cities within the same country. Costs related to local inner-city travel or transportation between home and work cannot be covered. You should try to precise details for each type of travel intended for project implementation alongside the reimbursement method. If varied methods of travel reimbursement are proposed, such as bus tickets, use of private vehicles, etc., you should clearly explain in the justification section, providing information regarding the reimbursement. You should specify number of trips, destination, and number of travelers, if possible, in line with the activities proposed. You should indicate places and cities of travel, if possible, and you should give a link or reference to specific activities in the justification part. So, as I previously mentioned, the budget heading can cover international travel and local transportation. Then example has both types of expenses. So participation to the policy forum in Tirana for 2 project team members. I have defined the unit as per kilometer. So let's assume destination with Skopje, Tirana, Skopje, 600 kilometers. And again, there is indication that this activity is 8.3.3 in the project proposal. The budget line will cover cost of travel with car for 2 applicant representatives for a regional event in Tirana, while the unit value is determined as compensation per kilometer based on current fuel prices, experience, and standard project practices. Under local transportation, we have travel for participants on 2 days workshop in Ohrid, bus ticket. So we have, again, a reference to activity 8.1.2, while the clarification gives that this budget line will cover travel costs for 20 representatives on 2 days workshop in Ohrid, and the unit value is determined as an average price of bus ticket for intercity travel in North Macedonia. When preparing the budget part travel, you should check how travel costs are presented in the budget, whether per kilometer, whether per trip, or any other relevant type of unit. This will foster consistency and clarity in understanding the proposed travel expenses. Each travel item description should be sufficiently detailed to clarify its components and purpose. And for each type of travel item in the budget, number of units, number of trips, distance in kilometer, and corresponding unit values should be specified and justified. Budget heading 3 covers equipment and supplies, so eligible direct costs may include purchase costs for equipment, new or used, or depreciation, rental, or leasing costs for equipment, and supplies specifically dedicated to the purposes of the project. The equipment and supplies should be directly relatable to the project and necessary for its implementation. Equipment unrelated to the project objectives or deemed luxurious and expenses may not be approved. And you should check market prices for specific types of equipment that you are foreseeing in your budget. In instances where the budget allocates excessive funds for particular equipment and supplies, the contracting authority may seek clarification from the applicant. And if purchase of equipment is allowed or permitted, applicants must adhere to procurement rules and fundamental procurement principles. You should check the applicable guidance for applicants to see if purchase of equipment is allowed under the relevant call, while purchase of equipment furnished is not allowed under the Seldi call. When preparing budget heading equipment and supplies, you should ensure that the equipment is necessary and directly aligns with the project objectives and activities. To verify if all relevant details are provided in the justification section, conduct research of average market prices for the equipment, ensuring that proposed unit rates are reasonable and justified. Check if the call has defined any procurement rules or rules of origin. And you should also consider an option of renting equipment if it proves more cost-effective than purchasing, for example, renting a printer instead of procuring one. Budget heading 4 includes local office. So the guideline for applicants in the grant contract defines certain eligibility criteria for project office costs, which includes expenses actually incurred for a project office established or used for the project purposes. Local office costs may include a different type of cost items, such as vehicle costs, For project-related activities locally, expenses such as depreciation, registration, insurance, fuel costs for organization's vehicle, provided there is a reasonable justification and they are determined on clearly defined allocation key. Costs for private vehicles cannot be budgeted. Then office rent costs. Full rental costs can be accepted if a project is established solely for the project. Otherwise, this budget line can cover only part of rent expenses for an office that is not exclusively utilized for the specific project, determined based on a clearly defined project allocation key. Consumables or office supplies can include costs for procuring office supplies that are essential for project implementation. They are typically items that are not considered as fixed assets or durable equipment and utilized during project duration. And other types of services, including telephone, internet, electricity, heating, etc., that is essential for project office functioning based on clearly defined project allocation key. So if the project office serves other activities and projects, the cost allocated to the specific project must be based on a cost allocation system using a defined project allocation key. So the applicant must establish such allocation or distribution key and provide justification outlining design of such allocation system. This system should adhere to the applicant's standard practices, be consistently applied across donors and projects, and reasonable and justified. Examples of such distribution keys can include the share of total project salary in the total organization's salaries, or share of number of personnel allocated to the project in the total number of employees. Local office costs are usually budgeted on a monthly basis. All costs under local office must be directly linked with the project and necessary for its execution. They should be reasonable and compliant with the guidelines. And all information pertaining to local office costs, particularly the allocation key, should be explained in the justification section. So here I have provided an example on 3 different budget lines for local office costs, and you can see also explanation of the allocation key. For example, office rent 20% of total costs for 12 months. And the explanation is that this budget line will cover costs for rent of applicant office, while the unit value is determined on the basis of cost of rent paid for the organization office determined with rent contract. The percentage of allocation, key for allocation, is corresponding to the share of project staff salaries in the total cost for salaries in the organization. Then consumables, office supplies, same 20% of project cost. And this budget line will cover costs for 12 months for printing paper, printing toner, cartridges, office equipment, software, and other office supplies. The unit value is determined on the basis of previous experience and market rates for these types of equipment, while the percentage of allocation, key for allocation, is corresponding again to the share of project staff salary in the total cost for salaries in the organization. While other services budget line will cover office services for 12 months, cost for mobile and landline phones or project staff directly engaged in the project, and other utilities costs. While the unit rate determined on the basis of average of monthly costs paid by the applicant. Budget heading 5 and budget heading 6 are presented jointly on the slide. These headings usually cover direct costs for outsourced activities or services. Budget heading 5 has predefined budget lines that cover different types of direct costs, while budget heading 6 can estimate costs that are not already predefined under the other budget headings. Specific tasks that are part of the action, except for core tasks, may be executed by another person or organization or by a subcontractor. Subcontracting project core tasks, such as project management or coordination, is not allowed. And budget heading 5 typically encompasses outsourced expenses, such as publications, including design and print costs, studies and research, translation, interpretation, financial services, organization of conferences, including rental of venue, equipment, catering, etc., communication and visibility costs, and other outsourced activities. While budget heading other may cover costs that are not predefined under budget heading 5, such as financial support to third parties, if allowed with a call. In this call, it is not allowed. Engagement of external experts, etc. Each type of cost of service should be clearly specified and explained in the justification section. Number of units and unit values should be properly defined. Using lump sums is not recommended or allowed. Number of units for services should be reasonable and comply with the activities proposed. You should ensure that unit prices foreseen under unit values are reasonable and in line with market prices. And common principles that govern, there are some common principles that govern conclusion of external contracts, such as award of contract based on base value for money criteria or lowest price criteria, no conflict of interest. The example shows different types of expenses budgeted under budget heading 5 or other costs. So on the publication, I have foreseen design of report. The report should be a report of 15 pages. So I have one report and a unit rate of 100 euro, while the justification says that this report is foreseen with activity 8.3.2. And this budget line will cover preprint and design of report with key findings for performed research, while the unit value is determined on the basis of inflation-adjusted historical rates and actual market prices as providing in unbinding market offers. Then print of 25 copies of the report. So you should provide as much as details as possible in line with the activities proposed with the project description. Again, you should give reference to activity that is foreseen in the project description. For example, the budget line will cover printing of 25 copies of the report with key findings from performed research. Then there's translation of the report in English, 15 pages. So we have number of units per page, 15 pages. And the explanation is that this budget line will cover translation of the report in English language, while the unit value is determined based on inflation-adjusted historical rates. Under cost for conferences, seminars, again, we have foreseen the cost for the organization of the workshop in Ohrid. So organization of today's workshop in Ohrid, rent of hall and equipment. And the budget line will cover costs for venue equipment for 2 days for 20 participants, while lunch and coffee breaks also foreseen will cover costs for lunch and coffee breaks for 20 participants on the workshop, while the unit value is again determined on the basis of inflation-related historical rates and actual market prices determined with the market research. This is an example for budget heading 6, other. So I have foreseen expense for expert for research and the expert that will deliver and that will prepare the report from the research. For example, 4 days, the fees for 4 days. And again, the reference to activity 8.3.2. This budget line will cover engagement of external experts that will summarize the key findings of the research in a brief report, while the unit value is determined on the basis of historical records and average fees of local experts. Again, I have listed several points for you to check once this part of the budget is prepared. You should check whether proper definition of number of units or unit values for each item is used. You should avoid the global amounts or lump sums. Number of units of different costs or services are reasonable and comply with the activities proposed. Ensure that unit prices are reasonable in line with market prices. You should provide sufficiently detailed description and breakdowns into the main components and offer adequate justification explaining how the costs for each budget line were determined. Indirect costs should not encompass any eligible direct costs that are already foreseen under another budget headings. They should remain distinct from direct costs. It should not overlap or duplicate expenses that are already covered under specific budget items. They pertain to expenses that cannot be directly attributed or allocated to a particular project, but are essential for the overall operation of the organization. They can include some administrative, technical, logistical expenses that cannot be allocated to different projects. The allocation for indirect costs may be determined based on a flat rate basis with the maximum percentage specified in the guideline for applicants. For EU funded action grants, the maximum allowable percentage for indirect cost stands at 7%. and the rate should be justified and reasonable based on project scope and requirements. Again, on the example, I have allocated indirect costs for 4%. So in the explanation is that indirect cost is 4% of direct eligible cost of the action, while the rate is determined in line with the guidance for applicants. As you know, the maximum is 7%, and based on actual records of indirect costs in the organization. The last part of the budget is contingency reserve, which is a reserve for unforeseeable costs, and it could be up to a maximum of 5% of direct eligible costs, and it can be included if it is allowed with the guidelines for applicants. Under this call, contingency reserve is not allowed. And using contingency reserve usually is based on prior approval by contracting authorities. The section on justification, it's a dedicated section where you provide justification or explanation of proposed budget lines. It should be thoroughly completed with all essential information. It should mirror the structure of the budget, and for each budget line, you should indicate detailed explanation of each budget item, explaining necessity of cost and how they are directly related to the project. You should give references to activities or results outlined in the project description, as in the example. You should provide justification of the estimated cost and unit rate calculation. Before finalizing the budget proposal, applicant should carefully review the budget, the justification section, and the project description. This ensures that the contracting authority can effectively evaluate the budget before contracting and easily verify expenditures during implementation. The budget template may also include a separate worksheet that is expected sources of funding, where the applicant is required to fill in information of the total eligible cost for the project, requested contracting authority contribution expressed as a percentage of total cost, and indicate other expected sources of funding. Applicants need to ensure that the amount and percentage of contracting authority contribution aligns with the limits set in the applicable guidelines for applicants. From the example given on previous slides, I have also created the example for expected sources of funding. As you can see, the estimated total eligible cost stands at €11,910, while sending contribution is as maximum allowed €10,000, which presents 83.96% of the total eligible cost of the action, while the applicant will from its own contribution, will devote €1,910 for this action. I have also listed questions that you can use once your budget is complete as a kind of a checklist to see if you have respected all main rules for conformity of the budget, including is the budget denominated in euro or other currency line as prescribed with the call, are units, quantities, or unit values clearly defined? Are formulas accurate? Are there any arithmetical errors? Does the percentage of indirect cost conform to the instruction in the guidelines? Same for contingency reserve. Does the percentage of compulsory contribution, minimum maximum co-financing, respects the instructions in the guidelines? Is the requested grant amount complies with the instructions in the guidelines, minimum maximum grant size? Does the proposed budget properly aligns with the project duration? Does the budget cover the action as a whole and not part of only the part financed by the contracting authority? Are all three sections of the budget filled with properly completed with all necessary information? Does the justification provide necessary information, including appropriate clarification for each budget item, method of calculation, any formulas used, justification of estimated costs, along with the connection or references to proposed activities? Does the information in the budget correspond with the information in the justification section? And does the total eligible cost align with the figure stated under the expected sources of funding? So thank you very much for your attention. And I will now invite you to ask any questions, share any dilemmas you may have, or bring up any points that might be unclear for you. Thank you. Here you can see Question in chat. Okay, the question is from Radina, and it says, just to clarify, also in the full application form, the total budget can be upper 10,000 euro, means it includes also the co-financing, or the requested amount should be maximum 10,000 euro. So the maximum requested amount can be 10,000 euro, while your budget can be higher, the total budget can be higher than 10,000 euro, which will also include part of the co-financing. So our contribution should be at least minimum 7 and maximum 10,000, while the co-financing from beneficiary should top the 10,000 euro in your case. Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. We have like when we applied in the concept, we asked for 9,000 euros because I thought that the maximum could be 10. Now, is it possible to change that and then add the co-financing, or we have to stick to the concept?
The guidance for applicants defines that any substantial changes are not allowed, but when you're preparing, it certainly can go, you can certainly go different with, because it's an estimate, and with the concept note, you did not have the budget, so you can change this amount substantially.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
now you will start defining costs based on activity. So you're not asked to be strictly linked to the amount that you have referred to in the concept note as an estimate. So you can change it, but not drastically.
Okay, I have one more question, because usually the per diems, when we organize an event, we usually put them, like all of my experience, even in very big projects, usually they are in the direct costs. Like if we organize an event and we have like accommodation and for 20 people, we always put them in the direct costs.
You mean under heading 5?
Yes.
You can do it as well. For example, instead of allocating them under per diems, local
Yes.
for participation for participants of seminar conferences, you can include them under organization under heading 5. It will not be a mistake either to include them under budget heading 2 or under budget heading 5.
Okay, that was my question, because always in all of the budgets that I've worked, they were always on a number 5. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? So, okay, probably everything is clear.
Sorry,
Yes,
excuse me.
yes.
I have a question. I have a question in chat.
I'm
If you
sorry.
could please. Thank you.
I will read it. Thank you. Is it possible for the project manager or project not to have a permanent position with the organization, instead have their compensation covered under service contract rather than employment contract? Yes, a service contract can be allowed in, especially in small value contracts, but again, this should be the same conditions as should for the persons engaged on contract. The same conditions should be valid as regularly employed, such as that he receives the similar remuneration as those that are already employed in the organization, of he is working in the office premises of the organization, or the deliverables he's made are in the ownership of the beneficiary, etc. So yes, it is possible. However, you should have clearly defined contract, and again, you should have timesheets for her engagement, etc. Is this clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is IT equipment allowed? No, due to the low value size of this grant contracts, purchasing equipment, including laptops, is not permitted. Okay, any other question? Okay, you still have the possibility of asking question until tomorrow, 1st of November. And thank you for your participation and dedication to this process. Good luck to all of you with in the full application process and selection. And keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I only have one question, like,
Oh,
will we get the presentation or?
Yes, I will send the presentation
Okay.
today.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.